Hello, everybody. This is Audi, owner and operator of Modern Retro Radio. This is the Audi Podcast. As I always say, we're all about the music here, and we'll always be all about the music here. But from time to time, I just have to just do my little podcast and talk to people who I find interesting and people that I think you need to know about, because I have, like so many people over the last several years, I've gone through a major transition where I was a dedicated Democrat. I believed in the two-party paradigm, and then I realized it was all illusion, that it is all bullshit. And I have a guest here who has written I think, more than one book, but I got his, I believe his latest book, and it's got a lot of great quotes in it, and it's all about deprogramming yourself from the slave mentality that the powers that shouldn't be want you to maintain. The people who run this world don't want you to believe that you are free. They want you to see government as your authority. These people want you to believe that it is okay for men to govern other men. I find that highly offensive. And you need to break from that paradigm. Politicians are not on your side. Law enforcement is not on your side. All of these state actors, these Elon Musk, none of these people are on your side. Trump's not on your side. So, and by the way, this is an unfiltered conversation, so if hardcore truth, unfiltered truth rubs you the wrong way, well, you can just switch off for about half an hour. But I'd rather you listen, because I'm doing this to help you, not to work against you. And with that said, I want to introduce someone who I hope is my new friend. Everybody knows him as Cory, and I've been trying to learn how to pronounce his last name for a good week here, and I'm going to take a stab at Endrulat.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. And so with William H. Douglas, they put together a book called Slavery Gone for Good. The most important work in history is the subtitle. And I've got the author of that. He's got a YouTube channel called Cory Nature is the Answer. Shockingly, this guy's only 23, and he is so ahead of the curve. When I was 23, I was still a journalist, a music journalist, and very much a dedicated statist. And boy, I wish I knew half at 23 back then than what Cory knows today. So let me introduce you guys to Cory. And Cory, if you just want to just have some opening comments, and please speak freely. Nothing is censored here. You can say whatever you want.
I deeply appreciate it. Yes, this work for humanity to free itself from its current conditions of tyranny, of chaos that we often see. There's still wars happening all the time. You know, there's the economy, it's struggling. There's the health of the populace, it's struggling. There's a lot of different aspects. We can detail the problems all day. And my role here is to share the solutions. It's a work. It's the most important work in history, because ending slavery was a hardship, and after thousands of years, and ending tyranny, ending all these problems that we keep facing again and again as a human civilization is an important work, I would say, for perhaps the most important work ever. It really, even just changing one mind, can really make a big difference, I see, in my environment. If I can influence someone and say, hey, this is something that you thought was true that isn't necessarily true, so many avenues can start to open up for someone if they are truly open to it, or if they are ready. And oftentimes it takes experiences, it takes people getting hurt to realize that they were lied to, or that something is not true.
Yeah.
And it could be so.
No, you were right the first time. Lied to, not untrue, but no, you need to keep it real. Lied to is exactly how it should be characterized.
Yes, yeah, and that's what deception is. And
yes.
You have to ask yourself, why are there people deceiving others, and how are they doing so? In my book, Slavery Gone for Good, I detail this dynamic through mental slavery and physical slavery, the two forms that give rise to all forms of slavery. So when you understand slavery, or what some people may call tyranny in the aggregate sense of mass populations, you can understand perhaps the greatest evil in history, because we know democide is the top cause of unnatural death.
Yeah.
And that is not death by government.
Say that again.
Yes, democide, which you can look up this term, right? Professor Rummel, right? And you can also look up different studies like the Stanley Milgram experiment that talk about why this happens. He even proved that in America there would be concentration camps just like there were in Germany, because people have the same exact mindset as they did back in Nazi Germany, which is that belief in authority, in giving away your own responsibility, giving away your own ownership. This is what creates democide, which is known as death by government. It's the top cause of unnatural death. And that's not even counting even more statistics that Rummel did not take into account. It just shows you millions of deaths. I mean, look at World War II alone, and look at the leaders of those regimes. And then look at the amount of people who worshipped Hitler or Stalin or Mao or any of these tyrannical figures, and were willing to do anything for them, looking up to them as if they were gods, saving them from their current condition.
Yep. Now, one thing I learned about you is that you went through a major transformation. You're much more healthy, spiritually and physically. At one time, you've recently gone through a physical transformation. You're very healthy. You've lost a lot of weight, and does that coincide with your awareness of the slavery mentality that goes on as well?
Yes, I would say so, because if there's a disease taking over your body and you believe that you can't heal yourself, you certainly are not free. And I think, from a health standpoint, what people truly desire in their lives, not just psychologically but physically in the health field, is freedom. Freedom is, to me, like perhaps one of the greatest human desires, and even of all animal kingdoms, is just that basic need to simply express oneself and be autonomous. And now, we have technology, we have the ability to spread information like crazy. We can educate people en masse so they can be enlightened, so they can live in harmony with others. People have been trained to believe that freedom is chaos.
Now, how do you reconcile that will to let people know that they're free, while realizing that we have a power structure that goes out of its way to stifle people like you and myself?
Well, there's something the abolitionists called moral suasion, right, which is invigorating and inspiring the conscience of human beings and being able to express that consciousness that we have within us, which I also detail as natural intelligence, right? As we move into the age of AI, we see people are acting perhaps a bit more robotic, or they're dependent on the robotics, and they're not necessarily thinking for themselves. They're not using their own conscience. And when an order follower or someone who follows an authority figure does what they are told to do because an authority figure told them to do it, they are not using their own conscience. They're not truly thinking for themselves.
Right.
So it's not healthy. It is somebody who's becoming a robot when they are much more than that. They have the potential to live and express their own unique life with their own potential, their own dreams and desires to achieve amazing things, but they're being limited on behest of someone else they believe that they owe allegiance to.
Now, I used the term agorism earlier when we spoke. So, and that's actually a fairly new term to me. I learned it from a friend of mine who lives in East Tennessee, who has a homestead property, and he was hip to the bullshit a long time ago. He in the early 2000s, he was among the Iraq War protesters. So he's been an enemy of the state for a long time. And he hosts a podcast called Agorism, the podcast, and they just basically discuss how you can practically function as much as possible outside of the system. Trading with like-minded people, learning to be self-reliant, learn to make your own medicine, learning how to grow your own food. And so I've learned so much from him. And also, one thing that I'm doing, for instance, is that I believe that the goal is also to have a central banking digital currency. So right now I'm saving what I can, and I have monthly shipments of silver and gold back sent to me, and I don't touch it. I just let it. Hopefully there won't be a shit hit the fan event, but if it does, then I have some sort of prep. So that's where. Can you speak on agorism and how you apply to your life, if at all?
Absolutely. I think it's a great concept to recognize, hey, we're not limited to these standard market systems, to these certain corporations and their products. There's always alternative ideas, alternative solutions out there that people often don't hear about. And, why is that? Perhaps it is a extra measure of control upon the populace when there is control of the food, when there's control of the media, when there's control of these different institutions that affect people in their day-to-day lives. So when you start taking that control away from these institutions, you start to become freer in many, many more ways. And it makes it easier to then become freer in other ways, right? Mm-hmm. So it's creating a very natural type of supportive ecosystem, which within itself is something we can do with gardening. So permaculture is one of the subjects that I talk about as a solution to help people get, you can say, off the grid, but more so self-reliant, self-sustainable. There's no reason why we can't turn our useless assets into very valuable assets, such as the grass that's right in front of us. Even if we live in a small apartment, we can still grow things. And people do not realize that that can be a source of income, a source of community, a source of cleaning the environment, of really fixing the economy. So many things that people are concerned about in this world can be fixed through simply permaculture and permaculture ethics and permaculture principles, which is stacking functions. Every fence can be a food fence. There can be grapes climbing up it, and tomatoes, and olives. Everything can have a function and have a purpose, rather than just being there and not really serving any purpose. Right? Communities can have bountiful abundance, and then abundance defeats scarcity, which is a leading cause of war. So if we address this from a moral, mental, 5D, spiritual framework with the physical material, which is that 3D world that we live in, we can create a balance into the future, which has these very powerful, innovative ideas.
And what you just mentioned reminds me of a couple of points that I want to ask you about. One is about how you recently moved and relocated in your current life, but also wanted to get back to agorism and to just taking your own steps. You may be aware that the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, has bribed government to make it literally a crime to grow certain things like elderberry, which is good for the immune system. So my friend, the agorist I told you about with the homestead, he does something called what he calls guerrilla gardening. So because it grows in the wild, why should a person not be allowed to do that? So he just finds random places throughout his city and he just plants elderberry. So it's growing for everybody to access when it's available. But you were a guest.
It's abundance. It's free energy.
Absolutely. But I watched an interview, or you were you were a guest on another person's podcast, and I'm drawing a blank. He was an older gentleman. He's an old school self-reliant guy. I cannot remember his name, but you had shared that you recently you just moved to Florida with several other people, correct? And you guys are homesteading?
So I moved with my family, but I just so happened to move down at the same time as John Chidester, who was also from Pennsylvania, but he was from Philly. And I'm not homesteading, but I am looking for land in the area. And actually what I'm going to do is probably several pilot projects of land around here. Because for me, like I said, using permaculture, you don't really need a whole lot of land to get started. We have a food forest, and we're in an HOA. We're not in we don't have a lot of land, but it still can do a lot. And fortunately, we also have a wetlands, which is some fortunate, sometimes, other times not, because we're also near the West Coast, so we can get flooded. But, nature is extremely resilient, and things grow so rapidly. And even if one banana tree falls due to some extreme wind, you have 6 new ones coming in anyways. It's a free energy system, and it blows my mind all the time. I didn't expect to get into permaculture coming down here, but it's growing in momentum, and you can do it anywhere in the world, even in the deserts of Gaza. If you look up the Greening the Desert project, you can learn about that. So it's really possible what we set our minds to, and that's also the principle of mentalism, right? That's the all is mind, which is our mind creates this reality. It first had to be thought of to be created, and we really can tap into that potential and escape our mental slavery that way, right? Because now we're not restrained by what we think is not possible.
Well, let's talk about resistance to that, though. So let's talk about. Let's get a little conspiracy here, as they say. Do you acknowledge that efforts are being made to fight self-reliance?
Yes, I mean, I would say it's a necessary requirement for power systems.
So, do you think that it's far-fetched that there are many, many, many people who believe that a lot of quote-unquote natural disasters are engineered, tech engineered, HARP technology,
No, it's not a surprise. There's actually hundreds of U.S. patents on geoengineering alone, and let alone other technologies. So it's all public.
Absolutely. And I feel that should not be a deterrent to anyone becoming self-reliant. Because
Absolutely.
even in their own sick covenant, they acknowledge that if they get their ultimate wish, which I don't know if they're going to get that, but if they do, they already know that there's going to be another system that's going to exist outside of that. Let's call it their beast system. There are people, I've already decided for myself, I would rather be a homeless pauper than be part of that beast system. I would rather live similar to how the hippies lived in the late 60s before the CIA infiltrated it, where it was about sharing resources and skills and so on. That doesn't seem so crazy to me now.
Yeah. Yeah, what we actually need now is sort of a 60s revolution, I would argue. And now that we have technology, can share information more rapidly, I think it would be more effective, because a lot of those movements got co-opted with drug usage, right? And a lot of other practices that weren't necessarily on the same intent.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Woodstock the whole thing was a CIA creation. In fact, it was the CIA that actually provided the drugs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't want to blow your mind too much. I want to wait till we get to know each other. You have to question everything. I even question people who are truth tellers. So you have to just use your discernment. What keeps me grounded is that my relationship with the Almighty. If I didn't have that, I'd probably be in a loony bin right now. Because once you are aware of how our system really is and how fraudulent it is, and how everybody on television is a state actor, once you get used to that, then you can certainly filter out what's nonsense, And if
I think people don't think that's the case. I mean, I put out a video recently, right? It's titled "You Live in a World of NPCs," and I show a compilation of media all repeating the same exact thing over and over again. Even presidents saying this is the most important election ever, that you need to vote. And you saw that since literally like the 1800s. I mean, it's insane how far back this goes, and even farther back, because again, we did not have technology in the printing press back then to display all that information and have it public. But I truly believe, based on studying this work on slavery, and you can read the book yourself and see the quotes, it's like you see these patterns of history that have been repeating for the past 6,000 years of the same exact type of phenomenon. People worshiping authority figures, giving them more rights than them, saying, hey, I'm beholden to this king, this queen, and then I'm a subject, I'm a slave,
right.
I'm a citizen, and they limit their potential, and they say, therefore I need to be, protected from these guys. We need to take over their land, conquer them, take their stuff. It's very barbaric in practice. And as we evolve morally and consciously, we should recognize it as barbaric so we can get beyond it and move to better systems.
Barbaric, demonic, and all psychotic, and all of the above. So
That's right.
I'm holding the book Slavery Gone for Good, written by Cory Endrulat. And I'm going to just pick some random quotes from the book, and I just want to get your take on it. Sure. So here's one quote that you quoted, an abolitionist named Josiah Warren. This is from 1798. Government and its function is to use force, to prevent him from using force against me and mine. It interferes with my consent, to prevent interference with my sovereign right to control my own. Its mission is intervention for the sake of non-intervention.
Wow.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Also, I want to find one that's not too long.
Josiah Warren, by the way, set up several towns in the United States, because you have to bear in mind the abolitionists were part of the Underground Railroad. So when we're talking about agorism and setting up alternative solutions, that's exactly what the abolitionists had to do to free slaves and willingly break the law. They made their own towns. Josiah Warren even made his own currencies. He had one town called Modern Times that lasted for about 17 years with pretty much a zero crime record.
Wow. Yeah, and I remember you talking about the Underground Railroad, which just like, wow, it was like, that was so badass, that movement.
Yeah, I have a video on that too, of all the different towns that were created by abolitionists for people who are curious.
And here's another quote from a philosopher. This is from 1819, Gustave de Molinari. The sovereignty of the individual will, to conclude, be the basis of the political system of the future community. This sovereignty no longer belongs to the associated owners of a territory and its inhabitants, slave or subject, nor to an idealized entity inheriting from the political establishment of its predecessor, and invested with his unrestricted claims upon the life and property of the individual. It will belong to the individual himself, no more subject, but proper master and sovereign of his person, free to labor, to exchange the products of his labor, to lend, give, devise, do all things as his will directs him. He will dispose as he pleases of the forces and materials which minister to his physical, intellectual, and moral needs. Wow.
I know, right? You can tell it's written from that time period, right?
Yes.
And so Gustave de Molinari, because I remember, looking upon these guys and their works. I mean, he was an economist, and he was one of the first to really prove, at least, based on writings, and I'm sure you can find even farther back, not in America, not abolitionist time era, but to show that we can live without a centralized police force. Yeah. He actually has a whole book about how we can decentralize policing and defend our property.
Well, look what happened in North Carolina with the whole FEMA disaster, which, by the way, I don't think FEMA exists to do good. I think they exist to do the opposite of good. But the Hurricane Helene that just occurred, and there were people who lost everything. And FEMA... well, actually, I heard that one arrogant FEMA guy got his ass kicked because he was trying to boss these people around, and they showed him what time it was. I'm not advocating that, but that was definitely an example of the people reminding government who's really in charge. And also, FEMA was ordering the police for people to evacuate their own property or be arrested. And these are people who lost everything. So what was I getting at? Oh, it got to the point where not even the police wanted to go to some of these areas, and people in certain parts of North Carolina were literally self-policing. That was music to my ears to hear that. Yeah. They were self-policing. And FEMA, they all packed up and got out of there.
Yeah. Think about it. I mean, most people live voluntarily every day, and people, if they see some wrong, they jump to the occasion and say, hey, I'm going to help this person because I see they need help. And they don't say, well, I need to wear a certain badge or a certain uniform or a certain title in order to help someone, in order to defend someone. I mean, that's silly. This would be just a human courtesy, of decency, of morality to defend somebody, to help somebody. But instead, we presume that there needs to be certain identities and roles to do that within society, and that no one else has the right to do it except them. Right. And it's like, well, what's going on here? And then not only that, but not just the right to do right, but the right to also do wrong, which is included within, this statist mentality, which is that, they can take money from us through taxation. They can do all of these sorts of laws, which we would not be able to do. We can't tax our representatives, so-called representatives, or the people who control us, but yet they're our servants.
Or being arrested for drug possession by a cop who probably not only uses drugs himself but sells drugs.
That's right, and they often have a very high divorce rate, a lot of problems within their life. I mean, it's not a coincidence.
40% of them beat their wives. 40% of cops beat their spouses.
People go in and they're trained into indoctrination, trained into order following, and then it changes their mind, and they have bad relationships with other people in their environment themselves, as above, so below.
And a lot of them are very intellectually limited, and so if you're intellectually limited and then you're given a shiny badge and a gun and perceived authority, it is very easy for you to feel that you are the lord of other men, and that is very offensive to me.
And how many people have I met who are veterans, who are former policemen? A lot. After 30, 40 years of being in the force and recognizing they had an ego and recognizing that they were doing stuff they didn't want to necessarily do.
Yeah.
So if I see that as a pattern, and you see it also throughout history, it's like, my goodness, maybe we can actually prevent some evil if we start listening to what they have to share as well.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Cory, you are a fascinating guy, and I encourage people to subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's his sub numbers are inching upward. Are you up to 4,000 now? Or
Yeah, I'm like 3,000 or so. I've been told by bigger channels to start fresh. So I have other projects on the way, and a lot of different ideas and visions, different projects going on. But yeah, I encourage people to always share it and do the work themselves. That's very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cory, the name of the YouTube channel is Cory Nature is the Answer. You will find his content. You tell the truth, but you're so. I don't know. Sometimes I think you're too nice. It wouldn't be. I wouldn't mind seeing you pissed off a little bit more every now and then. Because I don't know how you keep such a level head. Talking about some of these horrible things. But I think you people will get a lot out of your content. You're a nice guy. He's a very good-looking guy, so he's easy on the eyes. If you want to, get your content from an attractive, smart guy who's passionate. If all other 23-year-olds were like this, we would it would move us a good to the, I would say, 70-yard goal line, or no, wait, it's backwards. The 10-yard, the 30-yard line. But so what do you do when you're not researching and consuming all this data? What do you do to keep yourself just optimistic about life and everything?
Well, nature's the answer, my friend. Right? I stand by my word. If I need to reflect, if I need, to take a break, I go out into nature. I think that's important. And of course, being here in Florida, you have beautiful beaches and things that inspire you all the time from the natural environment. And even if you're up north, right? I was from Pennsylvania. There's mountains up there. It inspired me. That's what made me who I am. So definitely that music, absolutely, big part of it. And that helps with my productivity as well. And expanding my thoughts. If you look into like Boards of Canada and IDM, a very little known genre, it can spark a lot of emotion, nostalgia, and different feelings. And there's different music out there that people don't know about, and just as there's different solutions. So I think being with family, being with friends, being able to just be with people casually and take your mind off of things, be able to let go, is very important. And music and nature can have the same effect.
Yep. And by the way, I was very pleased to see in one of your montage or compilation videos, you included a good bit of George Carlin, particularly his American Dream bit. Which
I would include the whole thing if I could. You know what I mean? I probably could, but I just end up reposting everything he has. He's definitely somebody who detailed this problem, unlike a lot of others, and it's incredible to look back on it because everybody's like, wow, George Carlin is right.
There are two things that I hope you're doing. A, I think you should have a backup YouTube channel, and you should probably get a Rumble channel. Because sooner or later, if you start getting too over the target, they're going to start screwing with you, Cory. Okay?
Yeah, I do have a Rumble channel.
Okay.
I'm also on Audese, Rockfin, BitChute, Brighteon, so I do have backups everywhere. So
wow, I just canceled my subscription to Rockfin because all the channels that I was subscribed to, for the most part, quit making content.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. There's going to be alternatives that die out and things that happen. That could happen. But as time moves forward, I think a lot of these alternatives are not going to really matter because people are going to start shifting the mainstream. And so I appreciate the alternatives and we need them as part of that transition. But the big change is going to happen when people within the mainstream start changing their minds, which I think can happen. It's going to be people who are not so far from different in the sense of it's just people who aren't struggling through life, people who aren't drug addicts or people who have faced all sorts of hardships in their life, just like the average Joe starting to understand this information. It will get to that point if what we are sharing is indeed the truth and common sense, as we call it. and it will become irresistible for a lot of folks. Like, which is why Larkin Rose made a movie, right? So he can do it through entertainment. Which is why I'm doing college outreach, so we can talk to people who are going to be the future. There's different strategies that have not yet been implemented, including making movies, which are only now being implemented to share this information. So it's all rather new, and I expect if anybody listening right now is opposed to this idea of anti-authority, anti-statism, I understand you, and I was very avid, Republican, conservative, constitutionalist, pro-border, trying to deport people, all sorts of things, like every single position. As you start to unravel your own moral conscience and question the psychology of the scenario and the history of it, you start to realize there's a much bigger truth at play here.
Well, you struck a chord when you said the psychology of it, because the last thing I wanted to ask you about, talk to me about cognitive dissonance and why. For instance, we just had an election, which of course is all theater, but Donald Trump, there is an action. He's not some untested thing that we're trying. He had 4 years of a record that we can all look and see what he did. And of course, none of it was good. So why are millions of people thrilled that this man was reelected? Can you explain the cognitive dissonance there, where he did all these things that they hate, but yet they feel he's going to be the savior of the country?
Yeah, it takes quite a bit to unravel, and I did a video talking about sort of the mental gymnastics of politics and showing how long-term good can never really come from politics, and short-term good is usually always used as a justification for the long-term evil. Democide is usually always at the done under a moral banner.
Say that again.
Alan Watts has said the greatest catastrophes in history have been done under moral righteousness.
Please repeat that. Can you please the short term that serves the greater long term evil?
Yeah. So, what I mean is, let's say Trump goes in office and he reverses a bunch of laws that shouldn't be there in the first place. Or let's say he takes out all these poisons that shouldn't be there in the first place, right? It doesn't mean that now we say, oh my gosh, he's the savior, he's saving us, he's against the elite. But many people are going to jump to those assumptions. And from that, it will make Americans much more willing to go to war with their fellow man, much more willing to follow orders, to believe in that authority, and to give up their own responsibility and self-ownership.
If he does do anything that's beneficial and it seems to support liberty, I feel that is their way of making his supporters go back to sleep.
Exactly. That's what happens. People become comfortable in their slavery. And that is, again, detailed in the book. Like Frederick Douglass said, I had a better master, but I was still not the master of myself. It's the same exact concept.
Wow,
mental
well said.
Slavery. You need to believe that you want to be a slave, that you want to be controlled. And that's why they have to provide distractions and pleasures and time to time benefits, things that you think are like, wow, they serve me, they care about me, when in reality you still do not fully own yourself. And so long as you do not, it's never going to last, and you're always going to be tricked, you're always going to end up deceived, there's always going to be some sort of problem. You're like, well, I don't know how this happened. It's like, well, I saw it happen. It's because, just like you said, you put your mind to sleep. And this is very dangerous, right? It's the Stanley Milgram experiment just put into the real life. It's been replicated all throughout the world. I have a whole, documentary on the Stanley Milgram experiment. It's not human nature to, worship authority figures. We've been indoctrinated into it through the schooling system, which is based on the Prussian model of schooling primarily. You can look up John Taylor Gatto, a former school teacher, who talks about this as well. David Rodriguez, who co-wrote a book with him. He's really awesome. Sharing these different strategies psychologically to create cognitive dissonance. Now, what that is when you're exposed to new information, you are close to it because of the current information that you have. And so you say, oh, that can't be true because, I firmly know what I know and nothing else can be true. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying right now on this, on this radio. You don't have to agree at all. But if you recognize that, it's because it's voluntary. Right? There are politicians out there that you have no choice but to agree with their positions, whatever it is. And that's involuntary. That is what statism is. It's basically, I want to impose my worldview on you. I want to suppress my conscience, tell other people how to live their own life. I don't want to tell you how to live your own life. I don't claim to know all the solutions. I may know some solutions that you may think are solutions, but other people may not agree. And there's a lot of personal opinions of my own that you may not agree with. That's humanity. Yes. I'm simply saying, let's not take our personal opinions and say this is law. This should be imposed on everyone. I have the truth. I'm claiming I certainly don't, because I'm a human being just like everybody else. Right?
Wow.
So it's simply recognizing we're all just people, and that's it. We're not slaves, we're not masters, we're not higher, lesser, this or that. We all have the same responsibility over our own lives, the same self-ownership, and we have to take control of that.
Cops, are you listening? Politicians, are you listening? Okay, the book is called Slavery Gone for Good. Now that's what you see on the front cover. But is it in bookstores? If you're looking for it in the bookstore, you're going to see on the spine of the book, let's say abolitionism. So, but you can order the book online. That's how I got my copy. Slavery Gone for Good, written by Cory Endrulat and William H. Douglas. It's a compilation of incredible quotes from a lot of fighters in the freedom movement, a lot of abolitionists, philosophers. And as you can see, the guy who put this book together is incredibly gifted in articulating the thoughts in this book, and you will be very enlightened and inspired. So, do you have any closing comments before we wrap it up, Cory?
Thank you. Well, I appreciate this opportunity, and I encourage people look into, if they want more on the permaculture side and what we can do, transforming lawns into gardens that create abundance. They check out my work, Natural Intelligence, the Technology of Peace, which I co-wrote with Jim Gale, who has 50 acres in Central Florida. He also welcomes any visitors at any time to basically share that solution with the world, to say, hey, we can end deforestation and poverty and disease, and it's all right here. It could be right in front of our house, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's that solution. And then for psychology, we have an over 24-hour presentation, extremely detailed, never done in history before, detailing the psychology of authoritarianism, totalitarianism, authority in general, and how we transform the medical system with it, because psychology, medicine, and government, these things tend to go together. So that's called Health Revealed, and the website should be released by the time this radio podcast goes out, healthrevealed.org.
Wow. Okay. Folks, this has been a great conversation, and Cory, I would like for you to do this again with me, and I do know that you do plan to one day engage in some fundraising efforts, when you're ready to make certain moves in terms of your gardening and your health foods initiatives. So we will be glad to support you. And if your travels ever get you to Tennessee, come to Nashville and say hello. All right.
Oh, awesome! Great. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. This has been the Audi podcast. I hope you got something out of this. Hope we at least planted a seed, just to let you know that there's another way to mentally exist and physically exist in this world. It's okay to not realize that everything you've been told is a lie. Just go forward. Today's the first day of the rest of your life. Thank you so much, Cory.
Thank you very much.